Have you ever stood in the middle of your life, looked around, and realized that everyone you ever loved had turned their back on you? I have. I still remember the moment the police knocked on my door, handcuffed me right in front of my family. My mother's face twisted in disgust. My father didn't even ask questions. My friends, people I had grown up with, shared every joy and heartbreak with, stood there in silence. Not one of them spoke up for me, and all it took to destroy my life was a few lies from the person I trusted the most. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, bruises she had carefully placed on her arms, spinning a story so tragic that no one even thought to doubt her. No one cared about the truth. There was no trial, no need for evidence. They had already sentenced me the second she opened her mouth. I won't lie and say I was perfect. I had a temper. I had fought with my parents before. I had made mistakes. But I was not the monster they believed I was. Not that it mattered, because at that moment, in their eyes, I was already guilty. And from that moment on, I had nothing. And if you think that's where the nightmare ends, you'd be wrong. This is just the beginning. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind this real Reddit story. And if you enjoy deep, thought-provoking stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more from Reddit True Vault. They say the worst betrayals come from the people you trust the most. I always believed that if I were ever wrongfully accused of something, my loved ones would stand by me, fight for me, believe me. But when the moment came, when I needed them the most, they weren't just absent. They were standing on the other side, holding the pitchforks. It all started when I found out Ava was cheating on me. I confronted her, expecting guilt, regret, maybe even an apology. Instead, I saw fear flash across her face. But not the kind of fear that comes from remorse. No, this was the fear of getting caught. The fear of consequences. And then, in a way I never could have predicted, she flipped the script. The next thing I knew, she was sobbing hysterically, showing my parents bruises on her arms. Bruises that hadn't been there hours before. She produced screenshots of messages I had supposedly sent, twisted, edited versions of real conversations, making it look like I was a controlling, abusive monster. Linda gasped. Richard's hands clenched into fists. I barely had time to process what was happening before they turned on me. You disgust me. My mother spat, stepping away like I was contagious. You're lucky she even has the courage to speak up, my father added, shaking his head. You're even luckier if you don't end up behind bars. And just like that, I lost them. The police came later that night. I was handcuffed in my own home, let out like a criminal while my parents watched in silence. The investigation lasted weeks, but there was no evidence, because there had never been a crime. I was released, but the damage had already been done. My parents refused to speak to me. My father made it clear, you're lucky you're not in prison. Don't push your luck by expecting us to welcome you back. My friends? They disappeared. Some stopped responding altogether. Others sent half-hearted messages, clearly unsure what to believe. No one outright called me a liar, but their silence spoke volumes. My university barred me from campus. I wasn't expelled, but I was forbidden from attending classes. Instead, they sent assignments through email, as if I were some kind of ticking time bomb they wanted to keep at a distance. I was alone. No home. No family. No future. With nowhere else to go, I packed a bag and left town. I had no plan, no destination, just the overwhelming urge to escape the suffocating weight of betrayal. I slept on park benches, wandered aimlessly, and stretched what little money I had until it ran out completely. And if you ask me when I hit rock bottom, I'd tell you it was the night I lay curled up on the sidewalk, freezing, starving, staring up at the empty sky, wondering if there was a single person left in the world who believed me. There wasn't. Not yet. But I would find them. I ran. With nothing but a backpack and a few crumpled bills in my pocket, I left town and never looked back. No destination, no plan, just the desperate need to get away from the ruins of my old life. For months, I drifted. I took whatever jobs I could find, loading trucks, washing dishes, sweeping floors. Hard, thankless work, but at least it kept me moving, kept me from drowning in my own thoughts. I slept in shelters when I was lucky, on park benches when I wasn't. I learned to survive on gas station sandwiches and the kindness of strangers. And somewhere along the way, I made a decision. I hated my name. Noah Richard Calloway. It wasn't just a name. It was a ghost, a brand burned into my skin, a constant reminder of betrayal, of the people who had thrown me away without a second thought. So I killed it. I chose a new name. One that had nothing to do with them. One that belonged only to me. Cain. It felt like shedding my old skin. like stepping into a life that was mine and mine alone. And with that, I started over. I enrolled in a new university, in a place where no one knew my face, my past, or my story. I worked twice as hard as everyone else because failure wasn't an option. I had no safety net, no one waiting to catch me if I fell. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove myself to anyone else. I was proving myself to me, not in a dramatic, sweeping, love conquers all kind of way. Not in the way movies tell you someone will come into your life and fix you, pull you out of your darkness, and make you whole again. No, Emily saved me in a way that was quieter, softer, and infinitely more powerful. When I met her, I was still carrying the weight of my past like an iron chain around my neck. I didn't trust easily. I flinched when people got too close. I avoided talking about myself because I didn't know how to explain who I was without unraveling the mess I had spent years trying to bury. But she never pushed, never pried. She didn't demand explanations or force me to open up. She didn't try to fix me like so many others had before. She was just there, a steady presence, a safe place, and somehow that was enough. Little by little, I let her in. It wasn't a single, defining moment, no grand revelation, no sudden realization that I could trust her. It was 1,000 little things. The way she'd wait patiently when I hesitated before touching her, the way she'd sit beside me in comfortable silence instead of filling the gaps with questions, the way she never made me feel like I owed her my past in exchange for our future. And before I even realized it was happening, I had fallen in love with her. Years passed. We built a life together, a good life. We got married. We had 2 beautiful children, Theo and Lena. I found purpose in my work, stability in my home, joy in the family I had created for myself. For the first time in forever, I felt safe. I thought I had finally outrun my past, that it had lost its grip on me, that I had buried it deep enough that it could never claw its way back. But I was wrong, because one day, out of nowhere, someone from that past came knocking on my door. And just like that, everything I had built threatened to come crashing down. I was sitting on the floor with Theo, controller in hand, watching as he furiously mashed buttons, trying to beat me in a game of Street Fighter. Lena and Emily were outside in the garden, their laughter filtering in through the open windows. It was a normal evening until the knock came. A firm, deliberate knock. I paused the game, ruffled Theo's hair, and got up, expecting a neighbor or maybe a delivery. But when I opened the door, my entire world shifted. Standing on my doorstep, looking older, wearier, but unmistakably him, was my father. He gave me a weak, uncertain smile. Kane. His voice cracked as if he hadn't said my name in years. Son, please. I slammed the door, hard, so hard that Theo flinched and looked up at me with wide, startled eyes. I swallowed back the storm of emotions raging inside me and knelt down, forcing a small smile. Buddy, why don't you go find your mom and sister? Tell them to come inside, okay? Theo hesitated, sensing the tension in the air, but he nodded and ran off. A second knock came, followed by a muffled, "Please, just let me explain." Before I could react, Emily stormed past me and threw the door open. "You've got some nerve," she hissed, stepping right up to my father. "You abandoned him. When he needed you the most, you turned your back on him. And now you think you can just show up?" My father's shoulders sagged. "I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Emily scoffed, shaking her head. "You destroyed him." Silence. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. My instinct was to tell him to leave, to disappear like he had all those years ago. But a part of me, some small, fractured part, needed to hear what he had to say. I glanced at Emily. She was seething, but when our eyes met, her expression softened. She sighed. "Fine. If you're going to listen to him, I'm staying with you." I nodded. "You don't leave my side." My father nodded too, as if sensing that this was the best he was going to get. And so, for the first time in years, I sat down across from the man who had once called me his son. My father sat across from me, hands clasped together, knuckles white. His gaze flickered between me and Emily, who sat beside me, arms crossed, eyes burning with fury. I saw the messages," he finally said, voice hoarse. "Your ex? She admitted everything." I didn't flinch. I didn't react at all. "She was talking to one of the men she cheated with," he continued, rubbing his face. "She told him she had to make something up because she was afraid of getting caught. That if she didn't flip the story, people would turn on her instead." Isla let out a sharp breath, disgust evident in her expression. "My wife," my father swallowed. "When I told her, she broke down. She wanted to find you, to reach out." But he paused, shaking his head. I told her no. I told her we had no right. I tilted my head slightly. And why is that? His eyes met mine, filled with something that almost looked like shame. Because we threw you away like a stray dog. His voice cracked. And no parent deserves forgiveness for that. I let his words hang in the air, waiting for them to stir something inside me. But there was nothing. Nothing at all. I never thought I'd return to that town. The place where my name had been dragged through the dirt, where I had been thrown away like garbage. But here I was, standing in front of the house I used to call home. This wasn't a visit for reconciliation. I wasn't here for closure. I was here to end this, once and for all. When my father opened the door, his face was unreadable. He stepped aside without a word, as if he already knew why I was there. Inside, my mother sat on the couch, eyes red and swollen. My brother, Jordan, stood off to the side, arms crossed, his expression carefully neutral. I took a slow breath, then spoke. Say whatever you need to say. This is the only chance you'll get. My mother broke down instantly. She sobbed, hands trembling as she reached for me. Noah, we were wrong. We should have believed you. We should have stood by you. I didn't move. But you didn't. She shook her head, face twisted in anguish. I thought I was protecting her, but I didn't protect you. I stared at her, that same hollow feeling settling in my chest. No, you didn't. Jordan stepped forward, brows furrowed. You ignored me for years. You never answered my calls. I tried, Noah. I swear to God, I tried. I turned to him, confused. What the hell are you talking about? I called. I messaged. I even tried to send money to help you. You never answered me. I frowned. But before I could speak, my father let out a long sigh. Because he never saw them. Jordan whipped around. What? My father closed his eyes. Your mother had his number blocked on every phone plan. She cut him off completely. Silence. Jordan looked at her, betrayal flashing across his face. You did that? I was scared. She cried. I thought he was dangerous. I thought I was keeping you safe. I let out a bitter laugh. And what about now? Do you still think I'm dangerous? She shook her head violently. No, God, no. I exhaled slowly, turning my gaze to each of them. You threw me away like I was nothing. And now, after all these years, after everything, you expect me to just come back. No one spoke. I pulled out my phone and opened my gallery. This is my family now, I said, turning the screen to them. Photo after photo, Emily, my wife, my son, my daughter. Their birthdays, their first steps, their laughter frozen in time. This is what I built after you all threw me away. They looked at the pictures, their faces full of regret. But regret wasn't enough. Not for me. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. And then I heard it, a frantic knock. The sound of someone rushing up the steps. I already knew who it was before I even turned around. Ava. She stood there, breathing heavily, eyes wild with desperation. Noah, please just let me talk to you. I stared at her. The woman who had shattered my life. Who had poisoned everything. And for the first time in years, I felt nothing at all. But then I noticed something. The way she was dressed, nothing like the girl I used to know. A little too put together, too polished, like someone trying to impress. The slight hesitation in her stance, the forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And that's when it clicked. She knew I wasn't some lost, ruined man anymore. I had a career, a family, a house. The life I had built for myself wasn't a secret, at least, not entirely. Maybe she had heard through old friends. Maybe she had seen a picture online. She hadn't come here out of guilt. She had come here because, after everything, she thought she could have me back. She thought I would be stupid enough to let her. I drove home in silence. The weight of the past hours pressed heavy on my chest, but with every mile that put distance between me and that house, I felt lighter. By the time I stepped through the front door, Emily was already there, waiting. She didn't say anything, just took one look at me, at the exhaustion in my eyes, and wrapped her arms around me. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For years, I had convinced myself that I was alone, that no one in the world had ever truly loved me. But I had been wrong. I just hadn't been looking in the right direction. I pulled back slightly, just enough to glance over her shoulder, to where Lena and Theo sat on the living room floor, stacking blocks, giggling over some inside joke only toddlers could understand. This was my family, not the people who had turned their backs on me, who had thrown me away without hesitation. No, family wasn't just about blood. Family was about the people who stayed, the ones who chose you, no matter what. I cupped Emily's face in my hands, pressing my forehead against hers. I'm home, I whispered. She smiled softly. Yeah, you are, and I meant it. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the ghosts of my past. I wasn't running from them, either. I had found where I belonged, and this time, I was never looking back. What would you do? If you were in Noah's position, Would you forgive them or shut that door forever? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more jaw-dropping Reddit stories from Reddit True Vault.